As European leaders plan for a future without the United States as a reliable partner, both economically and militarily, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte made his way to Washington to get an in-person sense of where the American president stands on the alliance. Here they are in the Oval Office last hour.
Mark has done some really good work over the last week. We've been working together, and he's done some really good work, so I'm very happy about that. I was so much in favor of you. You have no idea. They had another person that I did not like. I was not happy, and I think I kept him from, you know what I'm talking about. I said, this is the right man to do it. And he really did. He was a great prime minister of the Netherlands. He did a great job. And that's what he's doing right now. So thank you, everybody, for being here. And it's a very great honor to have you.
Joining us now, New York Times diplomatic correspondent Michael Crowley. So friendly in there, Michael. What does it say about Donald Trump's commitment to NATO?
I don't think it says all that much. Look, as we have seen in recent weeks, Oval Office sessions can go way off the rails. That one had some potential because Donald Trump has a history of, really ripping into the NATO alliance, the concept of NATO, his theory that NATO essentially mooches from the United States and its members don't pay enough for their own collective defense. And even at times, Trump has suggested he wouldn't honor America's NATO commitments. So you had to wonder what he was going to say in this case. But it went pretty smoothly. So that was a positive from the perspective of NATO supporters. I just think that we don't really know what Trump is going to do going forward with NATO. He kind of veers back and forth. There have been periods of time when he has been a little more copacetic, and then something seems to upset him, and then he goes into his kind of bluster and threat mode. So Rutte must be happy with that meeting, but I don't think NATO leaders are breathing a huge sigh of relief that all is well.
One of the analysts in Foreign Policy magazine argues that Donald Trump is going to be steadfast for NATO. Looking back to the first administration, there was a lot of bluster, but he remained in the alliance, and he got the alliance to spend more money. And that is true. They did start spending more money. They also started spending more money at the end of President Biden's tenure as well. 23 countries now contribute 2% of their GDP. And this writer argues that Donald Trump is doing the same thing now, that this is all bluster. He just wants to strengthen the alliance, and this is the way to do that. Do the folks you speak to see it that way?
Yeah, some do. I mean, I was struck in the weeks before the election when it was becoming clear that Trump had at least a very good chance of winning, talking to European diplomats who were not on this subject, not totally freaking out, and felt like what I was hearing was, no, we don't think he's going to leave the alliance at the end of the day. And, it will be tough. And people are going to have to spend more money. Some of them may not like that. But at the end of the day, he won't leave the alliance. So, it's not a total shocker that he's not moving to do this. At the same time, in his first term, he was, for most of that term, surrounded by senior national security officials who are strong supporters of the NATO alliance. There are still some in his orbit now, but as we've seen in so many ways, the guardrails have really kind of fallen off, and Trump is willing to do things he was not willing to do in his first term. Last point, I would say, yes, you do have to give him credit. And I think even you do hear national security Democrats say, look, his threats and his bluster have gotten these countries to spend more money. The problem is you just don't know what is only a threat, what is only bluster, and what might be the first step towards actually following through. So, you can give him some credit, I think, for pushing allies to spend more. I don't think you can assume that that is all he's doing. And again, I don't think people are feeling like they're totally in the clear here.
Michael Crowley, thank you very much.